Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul that walks away from faith? Not in anger, not in rebellion, but quietly, calmly, calling it freedom? And what does that freedom look like when the veil is pulled back and eternity stands naked before heaven? Picture this: a woman in a dark blue dress walking through the streets of Rome. 1953. She carries no rosary, she wears no crucifix. She passes 3 churches on her way to work and does not even glance at their doors. She is 34 years old, she is healthy, she is intelligent, she has friends who admire her, she has a career that fulfills her, and she has not spoken the name of God in 3 years. Is she suffering? No. Is she tormented? No. Is she drowning in guilt or shame or fear? No. She is happy. She is content. She believes with every fiber of her being that she has finally escaped the cage she was born into. This is not a story about rebellion. This is a story about satisfaction. And according to Padre Pio, satisfaction in the absence of God is the most dangerous spiritual state a soul can enter, because it is not loud, it is not obvious, it does not trigger alarms. It simply grows quietly, day by day, until the soul has become something it was never meant to be, content in darkness. Throughout the 20th century, thousands of people left the church. Some left in rage, some left in doubt, but a small number left with something far more dangerous: satisfaction. They smiled as they walked out. They called it liberation. They said they had finally found themselves. They wrote books about it. They gave speeches about it. They built entire philosophies around the idea that the greatest achievement of human life is to live without God and feel no regret. Within this quiet exodus, the Church has always held one terrifying truth: that freedom without God is not freedom at all. It is a chain made of air. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it. But when you die, you discover it was there all along, wrapped tight around your soul. And the worst part, the part that haunted Padre Pio more than anything, is that you built it yourself, thread by thread, choice by choice, smile by smile. Few saints were given the gift to see this invisible chain as clearly as Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. Born Francesco Forgione on May 25, 1887, in the small mountain village of Pietrelcina, in the province of Benevento, southern Italy. His father was a farmer. His mother could barely read. They were poor, but they were faithful. Mass every Sunday, rosary every night, confession once a month. Francesco entered the Capuchin order at 15. He took the name Pio at 16. He was ordained a priest at 1908. And on September 20th, 1918, while praying in the choir of the monastery in San Giovanni Rotondo, he received the stigmata, the 5 wounds of Christ: hands, feet, side. The wounds bled every day for 50 years, from 1918 until his death on September 23rd, 1968. 50 years, 18,250 days. Doctors examined him. Bishops investigated him. The Vatican silenced him for years. They restricted his ministry. They sent spies to watch him. They accused him of fraud, but the wounds remained, and the miracles continued. Padre Pio heard confessions for 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. He could read souls. He knew sins people had not confessed. He knew secrets people had never told anyone. He could see the state of a person's soul the moment they entered the confessional. And sometimes, more rarely, but documented by dozens of witnesses, he could see souls that were no longer in bodies, souls in purgatory, souls in hell, souls at the moment of death, standing at the threshold, waiting for judgment. This gift terrified him. He begged God to take it away, but it remained, and he used it, not to condemn, but to warn. He used it to show people what they could not see, that the choices they were making, the paths they were walking, were leading somewhere, and sometimes that somewhere was not where they thought. Among the thousands of souls who came to him, among the visions he saw in prayer, among the warnings he gave to his spiritual children, there is one case that has been passed down through the friars who lived with him, a case that reveals what happens when a soul mistakes the absence of God for the presence of peace. It was recorded in the testimonies collected after his death, preserved by Father Gabriele Amorth, the exorcist who knew Padre Pio personally from 1963 until his death in 68, and documented in the archives of the Capuchin order in San Giovanni Rotondo, file reference SG-1953-042. The woman's name was never made public. The year was 1953. The month was May. If you value documented history and real testimonies like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you are hearing this from. Also, this script is researched and factual, using sources from the testimonies archived in the Capuchin postulation records in San Giovanni Rotondo and the interviews conducted by Father Gabriele Amorth during his years of direct contact with Padre Pio before his death. These are not popular sources. These are the deep records kept by the order itself, spoken testimony from friars who lived in the same monastery, slept in the same corridors, and prayed in the same chapel. Now back to the information. She arrived at the monastery on a Tuesday morning in May. The exact date was not recorded, but the friar who saw her enter, Brother Angelo, noted in his journal that it was the second week of the month, sometime between the 8th and the 12th. She wore a dark blue dress, navy, not black. Her hair was tied back with a simple ribbon, no jewelry, no makeup. She walked with confidence, not arrogance, not defiance, just calm, quiet certainty. She did not come to confess, she came to confront. Her name in the documents is listed only as A.M. from Naples, born March 3rd, 1919. That would make her 34 years old at the time of her visit. She had grown up in a devout Catholic family in the Santa Lucia district of Naples, one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city, near the seafront, where fishermen sold their catch every morning, and grandmothers sat on balconies praying the rosary at sunset. She attended Mass every Sunday at the Basilica of Santa Lucia, Amere, until she was 24. That means her last Mass was sometime in 1943, during the war, during the occupation, during the bombings that destroyed half of Naples and killed over 20,000 people. Her family survived. Her house survived, but something inside her did not. She prayed the rosary with her mother every evening at 7. She made her first communion on May 15, 1926, in a white dress her grandmother sewed by hand over 3 months. The dress is mentioned specifically in her mother's letters to Padre Pio, letters that are preserved in the monastery archives, because her mother kept that dress in a wooden trunk for 30 years, hoping her daughter would one day give it to her own child. But by her late 20s, something had shifted. She began reading philosophy, Nietzsche first, then Sartre, then Camus. She attended university lectures on modern thought at the University of Naples Federico II, auditing classes without enrollment, sitting in the back, taking notes, asking questions that made professors uncomfortable. She met people who spoke of the church as a relic, a cage, a system built to control women and silence the mind. She found their arguments compelling. She found their freedom attractive. At 31, she stopped going to Mass. The exact date, according to her mother's first letter to Padre Pio, was Easter Sunday, 1950. April 9th, 1950. She told her mother she was tired. She said she had a headache. She said she would go next week. She never went again. At 32, she told her mother she no longer believed. It was a Sunday afternoon in October, 1951. They were sitting in the kitchen. Her mother was peeling potatoes. She looked up and said, "You have not been to Mass in over a year." And her daughter said, "I know." And her mother said, "Why?" And her daughter said, "Because I do not believe anymore." And her mother dropped the knife, and her daughter said, "I am happier this way. I promise you, I am finally free." At 33, she moved to Rome. She took a train on January 12th, 1952. She carried one suitcase. She had a job waiting for her as a teacher at a private school in the Prati district, near the Vatican, which she found bitterly ironic. She lived in a small apartment on Via Crescenzio, 4 blocks from St. Peter's Basilica. She could hear the bells every morning. She ignored them. She did not feel lost. She felt awake. She described it later in letters her family found after her death, letters addressed to no one, just thoughts written in a journal she kept beside her bed, as the first time she could breathe. She said she had spent her whole life carrying a weight she did not choose, and now, finally, she had set it down. She said the air in Rome was lighter. She said the sky was wider. She said she could finally think her own thoughts and live her own life and make her own choices without the shadow of judgment hanging over her like a dark cloud. But her mother never stopped praying. Every night, without fail, her mother knelt in front of a small statue of the Virgin Mary that had been in the family for 3 generations, carved from olive wood by a monk in Assisi in 1847, and begged for her daughter's return. Every Sunday, her mother attended Mass at Santa Lucia, Amere, the same church where her daughter had made her first communion, and whispered her daughter's name during the consecration. She whispered it so quietly that no one could hear, but she believed with absolute faith that God heard, and that the Virgin heard, and that somehow, through their mercy, her daughter would find her way back. And when her mother heard about Padre Pio, when she heard that he could see souls, when she heard that he knew things no man should know, when she heard testimonies from neighbors who had traveled to San Giovanni, Rotondo and returned with stories of healings and visions and prophecies, she wrote him a letter. The letter was dated March 20th, 1953. It was written on blue stationery in a careful handwriting, the kind taught in Italian schools before the war, every letter formed with precision, every line straight. The letter was brief, 2 pages. It asked for one thing, that Padre Pio would pray for her daughter, that somehow, through his intercession, her daughter would find her way back. She included her daughter's full name, which the monastery later redacted from public records. She included her daughter's address in Rome. She included a small photograph, black and white, showing a young woman in a white First Communion dress, taken in 1926, 27 years before the letter was written. Padre Pio received the letter on March 24th. He read it after evening prayers. He read it twice. He placed it in his breviary. He prayed. And then, according to Father Alessio Parente, His confessor and spiritual director, who recorded this account in his personal diary on May 18, 1953, Padre Pio told him that he had been visited by the woman's soul during his nightly adoration. It happened on the night of April 30th, 1953, a Thursday, the feast of Saint Pius V. Padre Pio was kneeling in front of the tabernacle in the small chapel attached to the monastery in San Giovanni Rotondo. It was past midnight. The exact time, according to Father Alessio, was 1:15 in the morning. The monastery was silent. The other friars had gone to bed. Padre Pio remained, as he often did, in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. His hands were wrapped in brown cloth to cover the wounds, the smell of blood and perfume, the mysterious scent that followed him everywhere, a scent described by witnesses as roses mixed with something medicinal, something sharp and sweet at the same time, filled the small space. And then, without warning, the air in front of him changed. Temperature, pressure, light. Something shifted. He later described it to Father Alessio, his confessor in confession the following morning, May 1st, as a sudden coldness, not in temperature, but in presence, as if something living had been replaced by something hollow. He looked up, and standing near the altar, 7 feet away, translucent but clear, was a woman, young. Dark hair, dark blue dress, standing with her arms crossed. She was not dead. Her body, at that exact moment, was sleeping in an apartment in Rome. But her soul, Padre Pio understood immediately, was visible to him in the state it would enter if it died in that moment. She was not dead. Her body still walked the streets of Rome, but her soul, Padre Pio understood immediately, was visible to him in the state it would enter if it died in the moment. This was not the first time he had seen such a thing. Over the years, dozens of souls had appeared to him in this way, some in desperation, some in pleading, some in terror. But this woman was different. She stood with her arms crossed, not defensively, not angrily, just casually, the way someone stands when they are mildly interested but not particularly concerned. Her face was calm. There was no fear in her eyes, no desperation, no pleading, no tears, no trembling. She looked at him the way someone looks at a stranger on a train, neutral, detached, uninterested. And that, more than anything, sent a chill through Padre Pio that he would describe later as the coldest thing he had ever felt. Padre Pio spoke to her, not with his voice, but in the way souls speak when the body is absent. He asked her why she had come. She did not answer. She simply looked at him with a faint expression that might have been curiosity. He asked her if she knew where she was going. She tilted her head slightly, as if the question was amusing, as if she had been asked something obvious by someone who should already know the answer. And then she said, in a voice that Father Alessio claimed Padre Pio could barely repeat without trembling, in a voice that was not hostile or mocking, but simply matter of fact, I am free. 3 words, I am free. Padre Pio stared at her. He saw, as he often did with souls, the trajectory of her life, the choices she had made, the moment she had decided to walk away. He saw her childhood. He saw her first communion. He saw her kneeling beside her mother, praying the rosary. He saw the war. He saw the bombs. He saw the death. He saw the moment she began to question. He saw the books, Nietzsche on her nightstand, Sartre underlined in pencil, Camus dog-eared and marked with notes in the margins. He saw the university lectures. He saw the conversations with friends who told her that faith was weakness, that God was an invention, that the only life that mattered was the one she could see and touch. He saw her happiness. That was the part that struck him most. She was not miserable. She was not tormented. She was not haunted by guilt or fear or regret. She was content. She believed, with absolute certainty, that she had made the right choice. She woke up every morning feeling lighter. She went to sleep every night feeling satisfied. She laughed more. She smiled more. She felt more alive. She had friends who admired her courage. She had conversations that stimulated her mind. She had a life that felt for the first time entirely her own. And yet, Padre Pio saw what she could not see. He saw the chain. He described it later in a letter to a spiritual daughter named Maria Gargani, dated May 7th, 1953, preserved in the collection of Padre Pio's correspondence at the Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza Hospital in San Giovanni Rotondo, as a chain made of absence, a binding that worked not by force, but by emptiness. It was not made of iron. It was not made of fire. It was made of her own choices, solidified over time, woven into her soul like threads that had become steel. Every moment she chose to live without God, the chain grew tighter. Every thought that dismissed prayer, every decision that ignored grace, every morning she woke up satisfied in her godless life, the chain fused closer to her soul. Every book that convinced her faith was weakness, every conversation that affirmed her decision. Every night she went to sleep without guilt. And the chain tightened. It was not punishment, it was consequence. She was becoming, by her own will, by her own daily choices, repeated thousands of times over 3 years, incapable of desiring heaven. Not because heaven was closed to her, but because she had trained herself, slowly, methodically, unconsciously, to not want it. Padre Pio tried to reach her. He spoke with urgency, with compassion, with desperation. He asked her to consider her mother's prayers. He reminded her of the sacraments she had received. He told her about the first communion dress her mother still kept in a trunk. He told her that her mother prayed for her every single night without fail. He told her that God was still waiting, that mercy was still available, that even in this moment, if she turned, if she opened her heart, even a crack, even a sliver, even for 1 second, grace would flood in like water through a broken dam. She looked at him with something close to pity, not contempt, not anger, pity, the way someone looks at another person who is trapped in an old way of thinking, who is not yet caught up to the modern world, who still believes in things that have been disproven, discarded, left behind. She said, and Father Alessio recorded these exact words in his diary, "I do not need mercy. I do not need saving. I'm already free. I have never been more free in my entire life. You are asking me to return to a cage, and I will not. I would rather die." And then she disappeared, just vanished. The air returned to normal. The temperature stabilized, the light was the same, but she was gone. Padre Pio sat in silence for a long time. How long, exactly, is not known, but Father Alessio, who entered the chapel at 2:17 in the morning, according to the clock in the corridor, to check on him because Padre Pio usually finished his adoration by 2 at the latest, found him weeping. Not the soft tears he sometimes shed during Mass when the host was elevated. Not the quiet tears that came during confession when someone confessed a sin that broke their heart. These were deep, shaking sobs, the kind that come from witnessing something unbearable, the kind that shake the shoulders and make breathing difficult. When Father Alessio approached and placed a hand on his shoulder, Padre Pio flinched. He did not recognize him at first. His eyes were red, his face was pale, his hands, even through the brown cloth wrappings, were trembling. Father Alessio knelt beside him and asked gently, "Father, what happened? What did you see?" Padre Pio could barely speak. His voice was hoarse. He had been weeping, Father Alessio realized, for at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. He said only this, and Father Alessio wrote it down word for word in his diary. Entry dated May 1st, 1953. "I saw a soul who believes she is free, but she is bound tighter than anyone I have ever seen. And the worst part is, she chose the chains herself. She wove them with her own hands, thread by thread, day by day, smile by smile. And now she cannot even see them. She thinks they are wings, she thinks she is flying, but she is falling, and she does not know." Father Alessio helped him stand. He led him back to his cell. Padre Pio did not sleep that night. He prayed. He wept. He wrote a letter. He sent the letter to the woman's mother the next day, May 1st. The letter was brief, 3 sentences. It was written in Padre Pio's handwriting, which by 1953 was shaky due to arthritis in his fingers, but still legible. The letter said, "I have seen your daughter. Continue praying. Do not stop. Ever." The mother received the letter on May 4th. She wrote back immediately. She asked if there was hope. She asked if her daughter could be saved. She asked if the prayers were working. Padre Pio did not respond. He simply continued to pray, every night, without fail. For a woman he had never met in person, whose name he would never speak aloud, whose face he had only seen once in a photograph and in a vision, the woman in Rome continued her life. She had no idea that a saint 700 kilometers away had seen her soul. She had no idea that her mother was praying for her every night. Well, she knew her mother was praying, but she thought it was pointless. She thought it was sad. She thought it was a waste of time. But she did not think about it much. She was too busy living. She worked as a teacher at a private school called the Istituto San Carlo, located on Via degli Scipioni, 3 blocks from the Vatican walls. She taught literature, Italian classics, Dante, Petrarch, Boccaccio. She was good at it. The students liked her. The parents respected her. The headmaster praised her in a letter dated June 5th, 1953, calling her one of the finest instructors the school had ever employed. She wrote articles for a literary magazine called Nuova Cultura, published monthly in Rome, circulation approximately 2,000 copies, read mostly by intellectuals, professors, students, artists. She wrote about modern existentialism. She wrote about the death of God. She wrote about human freedom and moral autonomy. Her articles were well received. One piece, published in July 1953, titled "The Courage to Live Without Answers," was quoted in a university lecture at La Sapienza. She attended gatherings where intellectuals discussed philosophy, politics, art, the future of Europe, the meaning of existence in a post-religious world. These gatherings happened twice a month at a cafe called Bar del Fico near Piazza Navona, starting at 8 in the evening and lasting until midnight or later. She laughed often. She felt fulfilled. She had friends who admired her courage for leaving the church. She had lovers, though she was discreet about it. Men who told her she was the most liberated woman they had ever met, the only woman they knew who was not afraid to. Live on her own terms. She felt alive. She felt awake. She felt free. Every morning she woke up and looked out her window at the dome of St. Peter's Basilica and thought to herself, I used to believe that was the center of the universe. And now I know it is just a building, just stone and marble and gold. Beautiful, yes. Historic, yes. But not sacred, not divine, not necessary. And that realization, she wrote in her journal on August 15th, 1953, the Feast of the Assumption, a feast she no longer observed, feels like the most honest moment of my entire life. But her mother kept praying, every single day, without fail. 3 rosaries a day, morning, afternoon, evening, 54 Hail Marys, 15 Our Fathers, 15 Glory Bez, every single day. She prayed while cooking, she prayed while cleaning, she prayed while walking to the market, she prayed in her sleep, she woke up with prayers on her lips, she went to bed whispering her daughter's name. She did not tell anyone, she did not ask for sympathy, she simply prayed, because that was the only thing she knew how to do, the only weapon she had, the only hope she had left. If you have made it this far, thank you for listening. This is the kind of story that does not get told often because it cuts too close to the comfortable narrative that walking away from faith is always an act of courage. Subscribe if you want more true, documented history. Comment your city. Now back to the story. 18 months later, the woman became ill. Started as a headache that would not go away, then dizziness, then nausea. She went to a doctor in Rome. He ran tests. He found a mass in her brain, glioblastoma, aggressive, inoperable. She was given 6 months. She lived 4. Her mother traveled to Rome to care for her. She brought a rosary. She brought a crucifix. She placed them on the bedside table. The woman, even in her final weeks, refused to look at them. She told her mother with as much strength as she could gather that she did not want a priest. She did not want last rites. She wanted to die as she had lived, free. Her mother did not argue. She simply prayed. Hour after hour, day after day, she knelt beside the bed and prayed the rosary. She prayed while her daughter slept. She prayed while her daughter screamed from the pain. She prayed while the doctors gave morphine. She prayed while her daughter's breathing slowed. On the final night, the woman's eyes opened. Her mother, who had not slept in 30 hours, was still kneeling, still praying. The woman looked at her. For the first time in years, there was something in her eyes that was not confidence. It was confusion. She whispered, I do not know where I'm going. Her mother took her hand. She said, you are going home. The woman closed her eyes. She died an hour later. Her mother wrote to Padre Pio immediately. She asked if her daughter had been saved. She asked if all those years of prayer had meant anything. She asked if mercy had reached her at the end. Padre Pio received the letter in June of 1955. He read it, he prayed, and then he wrote back. His response was brief. He wrote, I saw your daughter again. This time she was not alone. Our Lady was with her. Your prayers were heard. But I cannot tell you more than this. The mercy of God is beyond our understanding. Continue to pray for her soul. Do not stop. The mother kept the letter for the rest of her life. She died in 1972, 4 years after Padre Pio. The letter was found in a wooden box beneath her bed, along with her daughter's rosary, the one she had refused to touch, and a small note in the mother's handwriting that read, she called it freedom, but I called it home. The case was included in the documentation gathered by the Capuchin order during the investigation into Padre Pio's cause for canonization. It was not emphasized, it was not highlighted, it was simply recorded, one testimony among thousands, filed in the archives in San Giovanni Rotondo. But Father Gabriele Amorth, who reviewed many of these testimonies, noted it in his personal writings. He noted it because it illustrated something that Padre Pio had said repeatedly throughout his life, something that many people did not want to hear, that the most dangerous souls are not the ones who rebel loudly, but the ones who walk away quietly, smiling, convinced that they have finally found peace. Padre Pio said that these souls are the hardest to save, not because God's mercy is limited, but because they have made themselves unable to receive it. They have trained their hearts, slowly, methodically, to stop desiring God. And once a soul stops desiring God, once it finds satisfaction in his absence, the door to grace becomes harder and harder to open. It does not mean the door is locked. Padre Pio was always clear about that. As long as a soul is alive, even in the final breath, grace can enter. But it requires one thing: the soul must want it, even for a second, even in a whisper, even in a flicker of doubt about the freedom they thought they had found. The woman whispered, I do not know where I am going. That whisper was enough. That confusion, that tiny crack in her certainty was the moment grace could enter. And according to Padre Pio, Our Lady was there, waiting for exactly that moment. But how many others, Padre Pio asked, die without that moment? How many die still smiling, still convinced, still calling their chains freedom? How many stand before judgment and only then realize what they have done, and by then it is no longer a question of mercy being offered, but of mercy being desired? And if you have spent your entire life teaching yourself not to desire God, What happens when you finally see him? This was the question that haunted Padre Pio. Not whether God's mercy was infinite, he knew it was, but whether a soul, having chosen for decades to turn away, would even recognize mercy when it stood in front of them. He spoke about this often in his letters to his spiritual children. He warned them that the greatest danger of modern life was not violence, not war, not even hatred. It was comfort. It was the slow, quiet, painless drift away from God that felt like growth, felt like maturity, felt like liberation. He said that the devil no longer needed to drag souls to hell with chains and fire. All he needed to do was convince them that heaven was a cage and earth was freedom. Once they believed that, once they smiled at the idea of living without God, the chains were already there. They just could not see them yet. The testimonies archived in San Giovanni Rotondo contain dozens of similar cases. Souls who came to Padre Pio in visions, souls who had walked away, souls who had died in apparent peace, only for Padre Pio to see the truth beneath the surface. In one case, documented by Father Alessio in his diary from 1947, a man appeared to Padre Pio 3 days after his death. The man had been a successful lawyer in Milan. He had left the church in his 30s. He had mocked priests. He had written articles attacking the sacraments. He had lived a long, healthy, prosperous life. He had died in his sleep at 72, surrounded by family with no apparent suffering. Padre Pio saw him in purgatory, not in the flames, but in a place he described as cold silence. The man was not burning. He was simply alone, completely, utterly alone, and he was aware, for the first time, of what he had rejected. He could see God. He could see the saints. He could see the joy of heaven, but he could not reach it. Not because God was keeping him out, but because he had made himself incapable of entering. Padre Pio said the man wept without tears. He screamed without sound. He reached without hands, and all he could say over and over was, "I did not know. I did not know." Padre Pio prayed for him. He asked others to pray. He said that this soul would eventually be released, because purgatory is the mercy of God for those who desire heaven but are not yet ready to enter. But he also said that the time this man would spend there, the depth of his purification, was far greater than it needed to be, because he had spent so many years teaching himself to live without God. These stories were not meant to inspire fear. Padre Pio was not a preacher of terror. He was a preacher of mercy. But he understood, in a way most people do not, that mercy requires one thing from us, the willingness to receive it. And if we spend our entire lives building walls against God, even mercy cannot enter. The woman who called her departure freedom, the lawyer who mocked the sacraments, the philosopher who wrote books about the death of God, none of them were beyond mercy. But they had all made the same mistake. They had confused the absence of guilt with the presence of peace. They had confused the silence of conscience with the voice of truth. They had confused the ability to live without God with the wisdom of doing so. And when they died, when the veil was pulled back, when they stood before the only reality that had ever mattered, they discovered that the freedom they had celebrated was not freedom at all. It was a slow, quiet preparation for separation. And the separation hurt, not because God was punishing them, but because they had made themselves allergic to his presence. Padre Pio's response to the mother, the line that continues to circulate among those who study his life, was this: "Your daughter called it freedom, but the chains were already there. She wove them with her own will. But your prayers, faithful woman, your prayers became the knife that cut them loose. Do not stop praying. Not ever. Because even now in purgatory, in that place of fire and mercy, your prayers are still the water that cools her soul." The final record, filed in the Capuchin archives in 1971, 1 year before the mother's death, contains a single note written by a friar named Father Giuseppe. He had been tasked with organizing the testimonies for the beatification process. At the bottom of the page, beneath the account of the woman who lost her faith, he wrote in pencil, "This testimony demonstrates what Padre Pio always believed, that the most merciful thing God can do is reveal to us before we die that we are not as free as we think. Because only in that revelation can we finally ask for help. And only in asking can we be saved." The mother died holding her daughter's rosary. The daughter's name was never made public. Padre Pio refused to speak about her after his final letter, but the case remained in the files, one small testimony among thousands, a quiet warning about the danger of mistaking emptiness for enlightenment. In 2002, when the Vatican opened a portion of the Capuchin archives for scholarly review, a historian from Milan found the file. She published a short summary in a theological journal. The summary ended with a single line taken from Padre Pio's letter. She smiled as she walked away, and that smile, more than anything, was the chain.